Thank you so much for the invitation to come here. My name is Mark. I come from a company called DecideAct. And in that company, I'm the head of partnerships and expertise development. DecideAct actually has a chairman called Peter Søndergaard, who is also the chairman of Digitopia. So that was how we got in touch with each other. And over the last few months, we have developed a very, very promising partnership that will hopefully develop to something really good. My background for doing what I'm doing is that I have a PhD in strategy execution management, and more specifically, why do companies fail in their strategy execution, and how can you maximize impact? And therefore, when I got invited to this event to talk about strategy execution impact, came natural to me. So that's a bit about me. And to kind of hit it to begin with, you have probably all your own definition of impact. The one I'm using is that impact is about a change in an outcome caused by an organization. That impact can be positive and it can be negative. And it can be intended or unintended. I did not come up with that definition. That was one of the conclusions coming out of more than 3,000 organizations having worked together on impact. Some of them big capital funds like Blackstone, and some really big organizations. So what has this got to do with strategy execution? Well, the thing is that as I see strategy execution, it's about making a positive impact in a deliberate way so that you don't waste the money, the time and energy that you have spent developing the strategy, and so you get the impact either for planet, the people, or the profit. So that is my approach to strategy execution impact. And the thing is that right now, in the business climate that we're facing, I see it like this is a perfect storm coming. I don't know if you're familiar with that expression, but a perfect storm is a combination of some dangerous developments around you, where you have this very specific combination that makes it necessary to deal with a lot of different crises at the same time. So I would say this is what we're facing. So the problem then is, or the challenge then is, how can you create a positive strategy execution impact in that perfect storm? Some of you may be facing that storm already, and for some of you it's coming either this year or in a few months' time or next year. But it's definitely coming, and if it's not already there. So, this guy, Mike Tyson, is known for many things. He once said something that I think is important to remember. Everyone has a plan until they get hit in the mouth. So the thing is, we can make as many plans as we want to, but if the weather turns ugly and bad as we saw in the picture before, then it has to change. And therefore you need to have you find a new way of working with strategy. And over the years I've worked with many leading companies as a consultant, and I've actually, in the process of going through that metamorphosis that Halil just talked about, I've been a consultant for 20 years, and now I work in DecideAct, which is a company that provides a digital infrastructure for organizations work with strategy. And the thing is, you need to do something about this situation where you have speed as an important driver in business environments, and at the same time you have an issue about developing, making plans, making them succeed. Now, representing a company that develops and implements this digital infrastructure, it would be probably easy for me to say, just buy this and then you'll succeed. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. Because when it comes to strategy and implementation, you have people who need to work together in functions, across functions. You have technology that you need to apply in the right way, and you have processes that need to fit what your what your mission as a company is. And therefore, there are no quick fixes in this. However, what we experience is that if an organization actually decides to do something about this, then over a number of months, then something happens. And the interesting thing is that you can do something. I have together with me today 5 recommendations for you that potentially can inspire you. And those recommendations are about how do you actually deal with speed and uncertainty at the same time. The companies that follow these recommendations, they get some quite remarkable results out of it because they outperform their competitors in the industry with from 2 to 5 times on average. This is something that McKinsey came up with, and a couple of years ago, a huge study was made on the state of strategy execution globally, and there it also came out that the companies, the organizations that can move fast, they get 2, 3, 4, 5 times better results. So that is interesting. So I hope these little, those 2 couple slides will help you listen even more carefully. So the 5 recommendations you have on this slide, the first one has to do with how you can reduce complexity. And you're probably aware and you have experienced this, what I call the strategy jungle in an organization, where you have spreadsheets, you have presentations, you have all these kinds of documents hidden all around in the organization. And when you need it, you don't know if it's the most updated one, you don't know where it is, and so on. So that causes a lot of fatigue, a lot of challenges when people try to align about their strategy. So what I recommend to do is that you actually decide to say, we don't want that anymore. Now it's time to reduce complexity and move fast. And of course, you need a digital platform to help you in that process, right? And that platform, that infrastructure needs to embrace all the most important aspects of your strategy development and execution activities. Some cannot be part of that platform, but when it comes to the execution part, then it's something that I believe is very, very relevant for many organizations. So, the second recommendation is about deciding quickly when you need to reorient yourself in this business world that we're facing. Normally, people think that there's a trade-off between making fast decisions and making good decisions. Now, based on what I've experienced, you can do both at the same time. It's not easy, but it can be done, and it's a capability that can be developed over a number of months. And there are some prerequisites for getting there. One of them is, as Steve Jobs once said, be as close to your customers as you can. Strategy is about creating and maximizing the value that your company delivers to your customers. So when you have crises coming up, and you're already in some of them, maybe then it's going to be critical to be the one that is closest to the customers. And how do you then do that? Well, you need to have a full management alignment about where you are and where you're going. Actually, that's part of why we think that you should also look at Digitopia to help you develop that alignment. I think it's a really great tool. I've seen many tools over the years, and this is really great. And I think it's easy to go with. So this is an example of how you can work with your alignment in a very structured and efficient way. Then, if you want to decide quickly, of course you need to know who makes the decisions about what, and what are the prerequisites for making those decisions. So that is something that needs to get in place before everything just falls over you in a crisis. I would also tend to recommend you to have what I call a real-time strategic overview of where you are with your execution, where you are with your development of a execution culture, and where you can actually also work with spontaneously with topics that come up as a critical risk in the moment. That is something that we emphasize and value in the platform that we're working on. Then also many strategy management platforms, they tend to give you a lot of KPIs, a lot of measurements. Some of them have to do with the past, and some of them with the future. So to decide quickly, strategically, you really need to strike the right balance between the number of measurements looking at the past compared to the number of measurements looking at the future. And an example of this is McDonald's, who we all know. One leading indicator for them that also has to do with their brand is if the customers perceive McDonald's as a place I'm happy to bring my children. That has to do with whether a mom or a dad next weekend will actually go there with them. While a more lacking indicator, looking at the past, would have to do with how many guests did visit us the last week, and so on. So it's important to have this combination and find the right doses in that. Also, I have something that I think is very important. It's a request to each and every one of you, and that is to make KPIs key again. Because there are so many performance indicators in an organization, and many times it's so difficult to get rid of them. And that actually tends to make a company stick in what they shouldn't be sticked into anymore. An example of a company who has really understood this is the company Slack, that some of you may already use. Kelly, who was the vice president of marketing, she had these three KPIs: increase general awareness of the company, accelerate customer growth, and mature a sales pipeline. That was the three things she looked at every day, and the three things that she dived into once a week to improve. And then people underneath her in the organization, they had their own KPIs that were connected to the three KPIs that she had. So getting there is not easy, but it's something that is a great help to reduce complexity and decide quickly. And as she said, very specific and concrete KPIs can enable a team or an individual to go faster and make the right decisions in the moment whilst being aligned with the outcomes that the business wants to see, which is in line with maximizing strategy execution management. So this is very important to have in mind when getting to the point where you can make quick decisions. Now, we've talked today, there's been a lot of talk about efficiency. And when organizations work with strategy execution, there seem to be a lot of inefficiencies. So, therefore, our recommendation is to act efficiently. And this guy once said something quite clever. Well, he said a number of things quite clever. One of the things was, nothing happens until something moves. And therefore, when dealing with strategy execution, you need to engage the entire organization in the strategy. And that can be done in different ways. It can be done in many inefficient ways. It can also be done in some very efficient ways. And there it's important to have in mind that MIT, they did this study a couple of years ago that concluded that only 1 out of 4 organizations have fully aligned their functional KPIs with the strategic objectives. That is a real problem. So 75% of companies have not done this. And that is a problem, and that is causing a lot of inefficiencies. What we believe is also important is that when you develop a strategy and you work with the implementation, that each person in the organization knows his or her own role, how you contribute, what KPIs you have that are directly related to your personal performance and so on. So here you can see an example of Derek, who is involved in some initiatives, some game plans, they call it here. And he's also part of some specific initiatives, KPIs, and some specific tasks. So he has this very, very easy, accessible overview of what he should focus on, combined with the 2 or 3 KPIs that are the most important to him. So this is something we believe should be part of that digital infrastructure supporting the execution of an organization's strategy. Of course, you can add to that updates, you can communicate across the organization and so on, which is vital for making sure cross-functional collaboration succeeds. And that is something actually that 75%, Harvard Business Review made a study that said 75% of all cross-functional teams are dysfunctional. 75%. So therefore you need to find the right ways to deal with that, and transparency and one shared approach to strategy and execution is something that can really help you. Then the 4th recommendation is about tracking consistently what you're doing in your strategy execution. And this metaphor of being in an airplane, knowing exactly what goes on, is something that I believe can be applied to some extent to strategy execution, even though strategy execution, of course, is about humans and people doing the things that they're engaged in and so on, but you need to measure and you need to monitor where you are and how far you are. So that includes having trust in data. One of the participants in the panel debate mentioned that he had to actually reconsider the questions that he was giving to the consultant compared to the ones that he kind of got to himself. So that conversation with another person helped him to get to the point where he really knew where he was. So that's part of having trust in data, that you can actually believe your own conclusions, but of course also the data that comes out of your ERP systems and so on. And therefore, to track consistently has also got to do with providing you with a 24/7 real-time overview. Because if you don't have that, then you end up making decisions tomorrow that are based on the situation 2 weeks ago maybe. And that's not probably what you want to do if something dramatically has changed over the last few weeks. So having these systems, this technology in place, of course, is of little, it's not worth that much if you don't have some very healthy meeting routines. So therefore, as I said to begin with, there is no quick fix. It's not enough to implement a digital platform that deals with strategy execution. It's also a matter of finding out how the behavior should be in meetings, when people communicate, and so on, and develop common ground on that is also critical. And that is something that is important to have in mind. So the fifth recommendation that I have for you is about adapting, and do that in a way where it happens seamlessly. I think this metaphor with the chameleon is quite good, because it stays the same inside, but then it's been gifted with some abilities to change how it looks, like when an organization needs to twist the way the value contribution is in one segment compared to another. So therefore, as an organization, you need to be able to adjust in a way that is fast, that is seamless, and also easy, as I'll get back to in a few moments. So this is a lot about preparing for the future. And I know that you all know that, but I'm just stating it now because it's something that a lot of companies find difficult to do in daily work life a few months after they have developed their new strategy, for instance. So that can be done in many ways. You can work with scenarios, you can analyze those scenarios, you can identify potential risks, and then it becomes highly important where you look at, what you find as your critical success factors and the risks related to executing your strategy. COVID was mentioned as something that Halil said from the one day to the other. Then people had to work remotely and so on. And I mean, I didn't see it coming. I must admit that. But it's kind of just interesting to have in mind that actually, if someone in this room had read Nature Medicine in November 2015, there's a very, very precise description of what could happen if something else happened. So I know none of us is probably reading this Nature Medicine, but it's just worthwhile having in mind that when it comes to strategy and execution, you really need to embrace many perspectives and find out what you need to include in your own perception of your business reality. That is something that is important, seen from my perspective. I also think that it's important to not just make this a top-down, top management exercise. I think you need to somehow find new ways of involving people out in the organization in doing this. That also needs to be done in a very easy way. One way that we're using is that we have this visualization here in our platform that we call confidence level. That has to do with how confident can you feel in relation to what is going on and where you're heading. So in this case, 3 initiatives and 1 KPI has been highlighted as something that is associated with a risk. So the people involved in those initiatives are then with an easy access, they can go in and actually write what is the issue, how can we mitigate this risk, and then that becomes part of what gets discussed tomorrow morning in the management meeting. And then you have to, of course, find out what issues and what risks should belong to what areas of the organization, what level of the organization, and that is why you need a digital platform that can deal with that, in my opinion. I like what we do. I hope that's okay with you. So this is something that is quite useful. And so it's easy to say that you should adapt to the new things that are going on in your business, in your environment, but it's not always easy. In my opinion, you need to have this digital platform that makes it easy to do. You need some clear decision mandates. You need good communication. You need good ways of dealing with problems, as you do in any organization. So this is just a good help for you. And then easy access, clear lines of communication, all that is still important and highly important. So basically, these 5 recommendations that I promised you are up here. I recommend you to reduce complexity when you work with strategy and execution the best way you can. You need to organize your people, processes, your way of applying new technologies to the new situation so that you can decide quickly when something happens. And not just quickly, but make good decisions quickly. And then, instead of wasting time and energy when it comes to strategy implementation that never gets fully implemented, you need to act efficiently by engaging the entire organization and find good ways of collaborating across the functions through transparency, through good communication and so on. You need to track consistently with what goes on. Having a measurement that is several months old can be very, very problematic for your organization, and then find new ways of adapting seamlessly. So basically, that was what I had on my mind. As you may have found out, I think this is hugely important, and I find it very interesting. So if any of you think that you would like to dive into some of these topics, please let me know. I'm actually willing to talk about them. And well, I guess that was what I had in mind. So thank you for listening.